Hello! So, I love cosplay, but actually making cosplay requires a lot of time, money, skill, talent, determination, and I only really have one of those. And even if I did make epic, screen-accurate cosplay, where would I wear it? I don't go to conventions or anything like that. So what I do instead is casual cosplay, which basically means that I put together outfits that kind of look like cosplay, but you can wear them to the grocery store and no one will look at you weird. Probably. So I've decided to put together some Mettaton cosplays. I'm actually going to do 3 versions. The first will be really casual. It's basically just sort of in the spirit of the character. It's good for if you want to sort of channel the character but not have it actually look like cosplay. And it's really simple. Like, you can just throw it together and not have to do any crafting. You can add on with crafting, but you don't have to. The second will be the in-battle version, which is black and white, and the third will be in color. If you want to follow along, I will mention variations. So if you can't get your hands on a specific piece of clothing, you can substitute with something else. And if you want to skip to a specific part of the video, there are timestamps down below. Let's begin. So what you need for the first outfit is black pants of some kind, a black short-sleeved button-up shirt. Doesn't have to be buttons, it can have a zipper or whatever, it just needs to open in the front. Black fingerless gloves like it's 1985. If you don't have black, use whatever you have. You could go stripy if you want to be more spiffy, I guess. Or if this is not something you can get or not something you would ever wear, you can just omit this. And a purplish t-shirt of some kind. So the actual Mettaton color is this. That's the color of his boots and breastplate. That's a pretty uncommon color, and you might not be able to find clothing specifically in that shade, and you might not want to wear it at all, because maybe it doesn't fit into your style. But that's the beauty of casual cosplay. It doesn't have to be exact. Just find something in that general color scheme, and it'll be fine. This whole outfit is pretty versatile. Whatever t-shirt you have or can find is fine. You can even go long-sleeved. Whatever overshirt you have or can get your hands on is fine. Anything that I didn't already own for these cosplays, I got at the thrift store, so that's always a pretty good option. Now, the trickiest part of this cosplay is the footwear. Mettaton has tall, high-heeled boots. If you own something like that, great, use it. I myself do not, nor is it something that I would wear. So what I'm going to do is repurpose an old pair of shoes that I tried to bleach at one point and it didn't work, so I kept them and thought, I'm gonna do something with this someday. And I'm going to paint them with textile paint. Now, if this is not something that you can or want to do and you don't want to buy a whole new pair of shoes just for this cosplay, what you could do is just buy purple laces and put them into whatever shoes you have. If you don't want to do that or you don't have anything with laces, maybe get some self-adhesive paper or duct tape or something and just make little stars or hearts and put them on your shoes to make them a bit more in line with this cosplay. And then when you're not cosplaying, you could just take them off. Just, you know, make sure that your shoes can actually handle that. So this is our base. And now we're going to add to it with arts and crafts. All of which are obviously optional, so pick and choose what you want to do. Firstly, let's incorporate a heart into this outfit. Now, there's a couple of ways you can do that. Firstly, you can just get a heart-shaped belt buckle. If you can't or don't want to do that, you can just attach a heart to whatever belt buckle that you have. The easiest way to do that is to just get self-adhesive paper. You can get that at a stationery store, and I think maybe even some grocery stores, although they usually tend to sell sets. At a stationery store, you'll usually be able to buy like a single A4 sheet of self-adhesive paper, and then you can just print a heart out on it in whatever size you need, and then cut it out and stick it onto your belt buckle. Now, since I'm using leftovers of self-adhesive paper, I'm going to use a printout of the heart, use it as a stencil, then cut it out and stick it onto my belt buckle. So this is the belt that I have, which I got at the grocery store for like $3, I think. And this is the belt buckle. It's not very big, but it's a flat surface that's great for attaching something to. If you don't have a belt buckle like this, that's kind of a flat surface that's easy to glue something to, then you could make the heart out of cardboard and then just kind of tie it to your belt buckle, although that might look a bit more clunky and it will stand out more. So if you feel like that's too much or it doesn't fit into your style, then just don't make this. Now, let's move on to some nail art. So what you can do for nail art for this outfit depends largely on your level of skill. If you don't really do nail art much, you could just paint your nails black and be done with it, or maybe do one purple or pink accent nail. Or you could buy or make some stencils, maybe paint some pink stars on a black background. What I attempted to do was paint straight purple lines into each nail using self-made stencils, which I made from self-adhesive wallpaper. And I also painted an M on my right thumb. It didn't come out looking particularly good, both because I used textile paint for this, since I don't really own a lot of nail polish colors, and because I don't really know what I'm doing. I don't do nail art much. So, depending on how good you are at this, you can go really simple or really elaborate. It's really up to you. The next bit of crafting that I'm going to do is decorate the t-shirt a little bit. I'm just going to put a few stars on it. If you want to do this, but you don't really know how to work with textile paint, I will do a more in-depth tutorial later on in the video. So you can skip to that right now or just keep watching. You could just make the stars on the t-shirt solid black. It'll be easier to make and they'll be more visible. I also made these Mettaton pins. If anyone wants a tutorial on how to make them, just let me know and I'll make one. As far as hair and makeup goes, I'd say that since this is a very casual cosplay, whatever you usually do or don't do with your hair and makeup is probably what you should stick with. If you do makeup, maybe just stick to this color scheme. I will talk a bit more about what you could do with your hair in the third outfit, because that one is kind of a bit more elaborate and a bit more screen accurate. But since this is very casual, just do whatever you usually do. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So the in-battle black and white cosplay is probably the easiest one, in the sense that it doesn't involve a lot of elements. All you need is black pants, a long-sleeved stripy shirt, a black t-shirt, and some footwear. And it only involves one bit of crafting, though admittedly it's a pretty big one. we're going to take all of this stuff on Mettaton's front and we're going to paint it on a t-shirt. If you know how to do that, feel free to skip this part, but if not, stick around and I'm going to show you how to do it. In order to paint an elaborate image on a piece of clothing, first and foremost you need a stencil. The easiest way to make the stencil is to simply print out the image on a piece of self-adhesive paper and then cut out the stencil. But just in case you don't have the opportunity to do that for some reason, another option is to just print out the image on a regular piece of paper and then use some self-adhesive wallpaper. You can get this at home improvement stores, I guess, at some grocery stores. And you might even have some leftovers from some home improvement project or something. So I'm going to cut a piece to fit the stencil. So now you take your stencil, your image, and you need to attach it like this to the front of the self-adhesive wallpaper. Now you can do this either by just using regular adhesive tape, or you could use double-sided adhesive tape. Just gonna remove some excess paper so it's not in the way. So I'm going to attach the top and the bottom with regular adhesive tape. And well, this image, I'm not sure if it requires this, but usually a good idea is to use some double-sided adhesive tape somewhere in the middle to make sure that the stencil really sticks to the wallpaper. But if you don't have double-sided adhesive tape, just don't bother, because it's not necessary, strictly speaking, because I've done many of these things and it really isn't required, to be honest. It just helps to make it stick a little better, so it's easier to work with when you're cutting, but it's not necessary, so. Alright, so what you do now is just cut it out. So what I'm using is a wooden cutting board and a paper knife. You can use an X-Acto knife if you own one. And now you basically just cut it all out. But keep in mind that if there is an element that will completely fall out if you cut it, like for instance there is this square-ish shape that if you just cut everything it will just fall through, and we don't want that. We want these lines, but we want it all to stay. So what you need to do is mark some spots where you're not going to cut. You need to leave some elements that will hold it together. You could just cut it all out and then put it together on the t-shirt, but that's kind of harder to work with. So it's much easier to just leave these parts that you didn't cut that will hold it together for you. And now you just cut. Now I'm also going to use a ruler to cut the straight lines, just to make it easier. You can cut it by hand, but it's just always easier to use a ruler where a straight line is involved. You can use the heart for something else, like a belt buckle. Okay, here we go. Stencil done. Now, whether you want to remove the paper or keep it is kind of up to you. I like to remove it just because we're going to be applying paint to all this, and it's better not to have this extra layer. But, you know, it really is up to you. And this is where having attached it with double-sided adhesive paper can be kind of a nuisance because it's much harder to remove than just regular adhesive paper. See, it actually stayed on. So now we are going to adhere this to a black t-shirt. So lay the t-shirt out on a flat surface, as flat as you can. It's best to iron the t-shirt first so that it's really flat. And now we're going to need to attach this to the t-shirt. Now I'm going to cut out the little holder pieces. Careful not to damage the t-shirt. Now, before I actually start painting, it's best to put a weight on top of this for a short while, or a long while, however much time you have, to make sure that the stencil is really well attached to the cloth. So, now the irreversible part. We apply the paint. Before doing that, put something inside the t-shirt. Some kind of buffer, because the paint will leak through, and if you don't have anything in there to stop it, it can leak through all the way to the other side of the t-shirt. I'm using some newspaper and an old script. Okay, so to apply the paint, you can use a brush, but it's actually preferable to use some foam. This will waste more paint because the foam will absorb some of the paint, but it actually makes for better application because you can sort of dab the paint on and there's less of a chance that it will leak to the sides. Whereas when you brush, there's more of a chance that you will brush under the stencil. Now, if you want to make sure that it's really white and that it's not transparent anywhere, you can wait for a little while and then just apply another coat on top. But do remember that the more paint you apply, the harder it will be, and it will make the t-shirt sort of a bit more unyielding because this paint, it doesn't move with the cloth. So on that note, it's best to use, something that isn't stretchy, because if you try to stretch the paint with the cloth, it will break. Okay, so now we wait for it to dry for 24 hours. I want to mention that you can remove the stencil immediately after applying the paint, but I prefer to keep it on and dry the paint with the stencil still on, because I feel like that makes it less likely that something will leak while the paint is still wet. I'd say it came out pretty well. There's a couple of mistakes here. So, if something leaked to the point where it's like really annoying you, your options are to use white paint to sort of extend the line to where it's going to absorb the leak. Or you could use black paint to paint over the leak so that it's going to blend in with the t-shirt. The corrections are kind of visible, especially if there's a huge leak. Luckily, there really isn't much here that's really bad. So I'm just going to use black paint to cover this tiny leak here and here and here. So if you don't have brushes, that's fine. You can actually just to demonstrate, you can fix the leaks with a toothpick instead of a brush. So if you don't own any brushes, you don't have to buy them just for this. By the way, I'm using synthetic brushes. I can't speak for anything else. I've only ever used synthetic brushes for this, and I've had the same brushes for over 10 years, and they're really good for this. They never shed. They're still alive after over 10 years of use. So, that's my review. I'm going to let it dry for a little bit longer. Ideally, you should let it dry for another 24 hours after you fix the mistakes, but since I only did a little bit, I'm only going to let it dry for a short while, and then we're going to move on to the next stage. So now we're going to iron it through cotton cloth for 5 minutes. Now there's just one optional element before we assemble the cosplay, and that is that Mettaton's hands are white. So you can wear gloves, but if it's warm and you don't really feel like wearing gloves, you could just paint your nails white. I'm so bad at this. Honestly. Okay, so let's move on to the last cosplay, the in-color one. That's probably sort of the most screen accurate. none of this is screen accurate. So for this one, we're going to be doing the breastplate and the heart separately. What you'll need is black pants, a long-sleeved stripy shirt, a sleeveless shirt, a short-sleeved button-up, and some white gloves. That's kind of optional, I guess. Now, instead of using a sleeveless shirt and a button-up over it, you could just use a t-shirt. But I feel like the button-up kind of looks more interesting, I guess. Now, for the sleeveless shirt, I'm actually using what used to be a turtleneck that belonged to my mother. She was going to throw it away, but I cut off the neck and the sleeves, and now I'm using it for this cosplay. So if you have old clothing that maybe has like holes in the armpits or something, you could repurpose it for this cosplay. So on the sleeveless shirt or the t-shirt, whatever you're going with, we are going to create the breastplate. Now, before I paint something on clothing with textile paint, I like to render it in a photo editing program first and see what it's going to look like. So what I've decided to go with is making the breastplate a sort of purple rectangle and leaving the dial and the speaker, or whatever it is he has on his chest, in black. So for this, instead of creating a stencil where you cut out the parts that you want to fill in with paint, I'm actually going to take the cutout shapes and attach them to the cloth and then paint over them. And then I remove them, and this is what it looks like. Now, for the heart, you could do the same thing that I did in the first cosplay, which is attach a heart to a belt buckle or wear a heart-shaped belt buckle. But I've decided to go a little further for this one. Now, I'm going to be using this, which is a metal decorative belt, I guess, that my mother found in the back of her closet, and she wanted to throw it away, but I was like, no, give it here, I know what to do with it. So I'm going to put this over my waist and attach a heart to it. So for the heart, you could use, for example, a heart-shaped keychain, like this one that I happen to have. You could paint it or attach some colored paper to it to make it the color that you want it to be. But what I did was make this out of polymer clay. Again, if anyone wants a tutorial, just let me know. This is actually pretty easy to make. I'm sure most people could do it. His hands are white, so you could either paint your nails white and call it a day, or wear white gloves. I guess it depends on what the weather is and what you're comfortable with. For shoes, I'm going to be using the same pair of shoes that I used in the first cosplay, which is the shoes that I painted with textile paint. Or if you have high-heeled boots, that could work. If you don't have purple, just go with black. Okay, let's assemble it. The fandom has for some reason decided that Mettaton has streaks in his hair, which canonically he actually does not. But he's often portrayed and cosplayed with pink or purple streaks in his hair. And it looks really good. So if that's something that you want to do, you have some options. 1. Wear a wig. 2. Dye your hair. 3. Temporarily dye your hair with hair chalk or colored hairspray. Although I have to mention, with hair chalk, the color doesn't always come through very well on dark hair. So if that's something that you're considering and you've never tried it before, just be prepared that it might be a disappointment. Number 4, hair extensions. Just buy one purple or pink hair extension and put that in your hair. And number 5, braid a ribbon into your hair. Now for makeup, if you're just doing this as a casual cosplay, then wear whatever makeup you usually wear or don't wear. If you're doing this as a Halloween or some kind of party outfit, then feel free to paint your face. I don't actually own any makeup, so I'm not much help here, but again, there are some great tutorials on YouTube on how to do full Mettaton makeup. So this is it. I hope that it was at least mildly helpful, enjoyable, or entertaining. If you want me to do casual cosplays for any other characters, let me know in the comments, and thank you for watching.